Hi, I'm Milesy. This is not going to be an easy video to watch. It's not going to be an easy video to film. I made mention in the video that went up before this that I wanted to address some things that I've never really addressed fully on this channel. And I didn't because I never felt like I could. And a lot of stuff has happened over the last month that have made me decide that this needs to be said. It needs to be said, so let's try to do this. This is not going to be an easy video to edit either, I've just realized, but okay. So, anybody who has been watching the live streams or has been hanging out in the Discord for an extended period of time knows that probably knows that I don't have the best relationship with much of my family. And you've probably picked up on the fact that I've got some fun anxiety and depression issues. There's also some pretty significant PTSD issues in there as well that I just never really address openly, because that means as soon as I've addressed it, I kind of have to explain where it comes from. So I guess that's what this video is. So I realize that I've had this channel for about 3 years now, and I've never really introduced myself. And I think I'm going to do that. And it's not going to be a fun introduction. Anyway, I disappeared for a while. I do that a lot too. Anyone who has been with this channel for a while knows that I will disappear for a while, and then I will come back, and then I'll say I'm back, and then I'm not back. But anyway, okay. So I don't have the best relationship with much of my family, and I've been kind of avoiding putting this out there because the few family members that I do have good relationships with, I didn't want to do this in a way that would be harmful to them. But some stuff has happened, and I don't think that's relevant anymore, which is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. But yeah, okay. So, hi, I'm Milesy. I am 10 kinds of fucked up. And I have, at this point, there is no relationship with my mother. So for those of you who don't know, a recap of what you've seen on this channel so far. Because a couple years ago, I took some time off of this channel because my grandmother was sick. And we moved out here to buttfuck nowhere to be close to my grandparents. We live 2 blocks away from the county hospital. So when my grandmother was ill, I took a couple months off so that I could go down and be with her every day. I was acting as her medical proxy, making sure she understood what they were telling her, and making sure she understood what her options were, and helping her arrange that. That was what I was doing when I disappeared back in 2018 for a while. And after she was moved out of the hospital, we had her put into a nursing home. It was a rehab center, physical rehab center, but it was really, we knew she wasn't going to rehabilitate out. Even at that point, we knew that it wasn't happening because she had been having issues that were going on for a while. My husband actually works in that field, so he would come in and he'd help me, and he would explain the things that I didn't have the insider knowledge for. So he would come in and he helped with that a lot too. And he recognized that she was in her last 6 months, and she died that October. because there are certain tells. You can just kind of tell when someone is declining. And he was pretty much able to recognize all of that. So while much of the family kind of were holding out this optimism that Grandma would bounce back, she's bounced back before, we were kind of in the preparing for the end of life stage, and we were the only ones who were really doing that. We were the only ones who were being realistic about it. But I put my entire life on hold to do this. My grandmother was the only thing that was really going on. I was gone for most of the summer. I don't think I came back until a couple weeks after she died. So fast forward to last year, when my husband went to night shift, and then I became night shift, which was only because I work from home. And if I continued to operate on a day schedule while he was on nights, we'd basically never see each other. So it made sense for me to transition to nights as well. And this is where things really started to get bad for the second time. Not with my grandparents, but with my mother. And I will talk about the first time later. But so this time when my grandfather began to decline, I would call my mother and I would ask to be kept on top of things, because this time I was not being told where he was. When my grandmother was in hospital, I was able to be there. So this time when my grandfather started getting ill, I would find out about it several days after the fact, because my mother had completely taken over, which was fine because I didn't have the emotional fortitude to do that again. Honestly, I really didn't. So the fact that she had taken over, even though I'm closer, that was fine. But what wasn't fine was that when I would call and I would ask for updates, I would be told that there was nothing new. It's the same as last week. And then someone else would tell me, oh yeah, no, last week he had a fall. Last week he was in hospital for 3 days, or similar. And that kept happening. So I would call up there. My uncle lived with him at the time. So I would call my uncle and I'd ask, is Grandpa awake? Because we'd like to go see him. And he'd say, no, he's been with your mother for the last week. And we would never be told where he was. We would always get information well after the fact. So we were kind of being kept away. At the same time, I would ask, what are we doing for holidays? What's going on for the holidays? And I was always told, Grandpa's too sick. He doesn't want to deal with it. And then for Thanksgiving, what happened was I was asking almost every day, because if we were doing something, with me going to bed at 8 o'clock in the morning, I needed to know a good week ahead so that I could prepare and kind of shift my sleep schedule, because I have this really fucking crazy autoimmune disorder. I have Raynaud's, which on its own it's nothing. It's kind of a nothing disorder. It makes it hard for you to stay warm. I also have a severe vitamin D deficiency and IBS. And apparently when those three come together, you literally become a lizard. So I am quite literally cold-blooded. Any amount of stress, any amount of upset to my schedule will make me physically intensely ill. So when I'm fucking with my sleep schedule, I need to do it gradually. I can't just pull an all-nighter or else I get violently ill. So I needed to know that. So I was asking my mother for weeks leading up, do we have any plans? Have you figured it out? And the answer was always either, no, we're not doing anything, or I will let you know. She let me know at 10 o'clock the night before to be ready to be picked up at 11 o'clock in the morning to go to Thanksgiving. And I told her I can't do that. That is 3 hours after I go to bed. I can't do that. So that was spun when I didn't show up to Thanksgiving as me not caring. I didn't want to be there. And then the exact same thing happened for Christmas. I asked, what are we doing for Christmas? My husband and I don't personally celebrate, but my family does, so we would go to Christmas. And the exact same thing happened. I was told there would be no Christmas, that Grandpa was too sick, too tired, and then the day of, she asked me if I was going to be down in Portland, that the party started at 5 o'clock. And I'm like, no, that's an hour after I wake up. Of course I'm not going to be able to be in Portland an hour after I wake up. So that was what started a really bad mental decline, because this isn't the first time that she has done this kind of thing to me. So I quit reaching out because it was becoming very clear that I wasn't going to get any information if I reached out. If something happened, someone would tell me. And after about 2 weeks of me having given up and not getting anything, my mom called me. And she called me to chew me out about not caring. And why haven't I been calling? Why don't you call your mommy anymore? And she uses that language. Why don't you call your mommy anymore? You need to call your mommy. I am 36 years old. You are not my mommy. And that is very belittling language. That is a fairly standard form of abuse for these types of individuals, to belittle you and to keep you as a child. Basically, it's a very deliberate thing that she would do. So I told her that I haven't been talking to anybody because I have been so badly depressed that I have been barely getting out of bed. And I told her that things have been really bad and that I have been near suicidal. And this bitch told me to just go ahead and get it over with then. And this is the second time she has done this to me, because she did the same thing when I was in college. I didn't want to go to college. My husband was in the Army at the time, and I had the opportunity to move to Germany. And instead, I let myself get talked into going to college. I let myself get talked into the idea that I would never be able to accomplish anything if I didn't go to college, which even at the time I kind of knew was bullshit, but I was still in the mindset that maybe if I tried hard enough, I could please her and then the abuse would stop. I was not emotionally prepared for college. I did not have the social net to go to college. I was very isolated. I had no support system. I was your typical starving college student because I couldn't live with my mother anymore. I moved out the day I graduated high school. I actually turned 18 while I was in high school. I stayed at the house until I graduated. I graduated and the next day I left. And that's what happened. I spent the summer with my aunt, and over that summer is when I applied to college and got an apartment and moved out. I probably could have stayed with my aunt, but I didn't because there was a lot of stuff going on there that I could just kind of feel, having gone through 2 explosive divorces. Technically 3, but one of them I was too young to remember. I could see that things were going that way in my aunt's house as well, and I didn't want to be there for it. So I moved out. And sure enough, within the year, she was moved out as well. So I kind of dodged that bullet at least. But it got really bad while I was in college. And I told my mother that I am overwhelmed, that I can't do this, that I can't continue. And she kind of started using the same language, telling me to either grow up. One of the things that she really used to like to tell me, because I did theater in school, in high school, was, you're an actor, act like you're happy. That was something I heard my entire time in high school. And she would use that as well when I was in college, act like you're happy. And it just turned into the same kind of, well, if you're that depressed, just get it over with already. So I didn't talk to her for several years after I was in college. And I quit talking to her again in January, and it is now November 1st. So when she pulled that on me in January, I told her to never speak to me again, that she might as well just assume that I have died. And I have not spoken a word to her since January, since that conversation. So I kind of disappeared a little bit at the beginning of the year, That's why. Because I was dealing with that. So I've kind of been going through a lot of ups and downs this year. There was a stream that was on Twitch, which I believe I highlighted, where I was talking about this a little bit there as well. About how when I told my mother to assume that I had died, to never speak to me again, she, being the master manipulator that she is, convinced the entire family that I was the one who didn't care. So everyone stopped talking to me except for my brother. My brother, my half-brother, technically, so my youngest brother, and my 2 step-siblings, and my stepdad, who has, these people have no blood relation to me, have been closer to me than my blood family this entire year. That says something, because my dad, I call him my dad because he was the one who was there when I was growing up. He's dealt with this crazy. He got out of this crazy, so he knows that when someone says something about my mother, they're probably right. He dealt with it. So I think it was kind of toward the beginning of all of this COVID crap when I did this live stream saying that because no one is telling me anything, I went this entire year not knowing if my grandfather was alive or dead. And I had just kind of assumed for most of the year that he had died. And then I want to say it was around August or September, my uncle texted me. It might have been a little bit earlier than that. My uncle texted me saying that they were selling the house and that he'd be out of there within the week, and if I wanted to go up to see him, that would be appreciated. But as I mentioned, my husband works in a nursing home, so we don't go anywhere right now. We can't, because if we go somewhere and we get sick and he takes that to the nursing home, that would be a disaster, and that's not something that either of us really want to deal with on our conscience. So when I said earlier that this has all been very poorly timed, that's why that we just haven't been able to do the things that we need to do. That we haven't been able to do the things that I need to do in order to properly grieve and mourn. But when my uncle sent me that, I still wasn't sure what the situation was. I had assumed that since the house had been sold, that I just wasn't told my grandfather had died. That was my assumption. So, back in August, when my brother had his baby, a few weeks after that, it would have been early September or something, he sent me a picture of our grandfather holding his baby, and that was how I knew that my grandfather was still alive, which was a hell of a surprise to me, if I'm honest. I really wasn't expecting that at all. And then it would have been about 2 weeks ago that I found out on Facebook that my grandfather had died. Nobody had told me. I found out on Facebook. Because that's the kind of family we are. So while I will get belittled and berated for not using my phone, nobody will call me and tell me anything. I am expected to be psychic. So I had to be psychic because nobody has told me when the funeral is. Nobody. The only reason I know when the funeral is because when my grandmother died, I know where she was buried. And I know that they paid for their funerals 20 years ago. So I knew what to look for. So I went online and I looked them up. And do you have any idea how hard it is to look up a funeral for one of the most common Norwegian American names in the country? Holy shit. So it took me about 20 minutes to find it, even though I knew exactly what I was looking for, because there are so many obituaries and records under the same name, but I did find it. And this was right around the time that my uncle sent me a message. It was this huge wall of text message apologizing for not believing me when I publicly called out my mother earlier in the year and laid out all of my grievances. I did this on Facebook. Somewhere I might even have a screenshot of the post where she made the most tone-deaf response you could possibly make, once again accusing me of being the bad guy. The best part was, though, that she did it on a public Facebook post. So all of my friends saw it. And the dogpiling was fucking amazing. I won't deny, I took a little bit of a delight from the dogpiling that happened when she made that boneheaded comment. Anyway, I got this message from my uncle, and I don't know the full story. I don't know when I will be able to meet up with him because of the whole situation. We're not going to the funeral. We really thought about it, and then places started locking down again, so we're like, we can't go. We can't go. We have no safe way of getting down there. We have no safe way of staying down there. We're not going. So I don't actually know exactly what happened with my uncle, because there's a lot of stuff that he didn't want to put in text, and I'm not going to relay anything that he told me. But the crux of the matter is that after the funeral, he is never speaking to a single other family member of ours again. He is cutting out not only my mother, but my aunt. Which doesn't surprise me, because this entire time, the only thing I've ever heard from my aunt all year is to tell me to grow up and drop this grudge with my mother because it's hurting her. The last thing I said to my aunt was to keep protecting abusers, because that's all she's ever been good at, and I don't regret that, because she is incredibly good at protecting abusers. And there's a lot to go into there, too. That doesn't really need to be gone into, because I think it speaks for itself. But I mentioned that I moved out of my mother's house the day after I graduated high school. I stuck around long enough for my graduation ceremony, because that was an excuse to have one last party with my friends before I never saw them again, because I knew that I was leaving and that I was going to disappear. And I did. But I could go back to the very beginning. I could go back to the day I was born. But I think the pertinent place to start will probably be when she and my dad, who, keep in mind, is my stepdad. I do not know my biological father, but my stepdad, who I call my dad, they had a very violent breakup, to the fact that my uncle actually had to come remove my dad from the house physically. I don't actually remember this. I have been told that I was in the room and I watched it happen. I would have been about 12. And I do not remember this. There's this entire chunk of middle school that I do not remember. So it must have been pretty fucking bad, because there's a lot of pretty awful stuff that I do remember. So that does seem to be about where it started, though, was right around then, because I do one of the things I do remember from high school, or not from high school, from middle school, when I was around that age, was my mother constantly talking about me committing suicide. That was her favorite topic, about how she couldn't leave me alone because I would kill myself. I'd hang myself in the closet. We can't have any pills in the house because I'd take them all. I was not a suicidal child. I was not a depressed child. I, to this day, don't know where this talk came from. But I definitely, in hindsight, and looking back on this, and working back on this with therapists, I do believe that when I was kind of hitting puberty and not being the darling horse girl that she wanted, she thought I was a lesbian growing up. And I think when she thought that, when she started to think that it would have been preferable for me to have just not existed. And if I killed myself, then it would have been this tragic thing that she could have got a lot of sympathy for. That is what I genuinely believe, because otherwise I have no idea where this talk came from. But this is what I remember my middle school years being, was just constantly being told that I was going to commit suicide. So is it any wonder that I am a massively depressed wreck that I am right now? So when she and my dad split up in a way that I genuinely cannot remember, she has this issue. She cannot be single. And I feel like the reason why she can't be single is because if she is, she won't have someone to back her up when she just gets insane. Because between my dad and the guy she eventually married when I was in high school, there were about 3 or 4 other guys. Sometimes at the same time. She would kind of suss out her options, it seemed like. So there was not really a lot of stability in between middle school and when I started high school. And when I was in high school, that's when she met Jeff. She met Jeff. He was, I wouldn't call him a roadie because he didn't follow anyone in particular. He lived in a truck at Portland Meadows. And his job was setting up events at Portland Meadows, which is it's the horse track. And they would have, that's where they had Rockfest and a bunch of other concerts. There were a lot of concerts and events there when the track wasn't being used because it's a great big huge wide open space in Portland. So when my mom was working there, she met this guy who lived in a truck and decided that she was going to marry him. And a lot of the family were saying when she started dating this guy, he doesn't have a job. He lives in a truck. He's homeless. Why are you allowing this man into your house when you have 3 children? And she married him out of spite. And I have since learned that, I don't know if it was before or after she married him, that he was constantly keeping her doped up on heroin and maybe meth. I'm not actually sure. But during this time, we were physically, mentally, emotionally, extremely abused. My brother says that he does not remember this, and I am not surprised, but there was a hole in the wall from when Jeff picked him up. He would have been about 7 or 8 at the time, and he threw my brother by his head through the wall in the living room. I have permanent physical damage from being beaten with a vacuum cleaner. I was, at one point, put into foster care for 6 months, and my mother did not notice. She learned this when I was an adult. She didn't notice that I wasn't in the house for 6 entire months. And while I was in foster care was when my dad found out that all this shit was going on, and because step-parents have 0 rights, he was only able to get my youngest brother out of the house. So at that point, it was myself, my other brother, and then these 2 assholes. These 2 absolute fucking psychopaths. And there was a lot going on. Like I said, I was beaten with a vacuum cleaner. I was repeatedly held down. I remember very vividly being held down in my bed, pinned to my bed while he screamed in my face. And I have really bad hearing loss and tinnitus in this ear because of it. And this is where a lot of the PTSD comes from, was 4 years of this shit. They didn't break up until I was about halfway through my senior year in high school. And I don't know how true it is, but I heard that he was stabbed in prison. And if he was, I'm glad, because he deserved it. So when I graduated high school, I left the next day. I went to go stay with my aunt, like I said, and then I went to college. So there's a lot that's going on. And this is a very condensed version of what's going on. I met my husband when we were in high school. I think we met when I was a freshman, but we didn't start dating until a year after. That seems about right. So my husband is the only person who saw everything happen from the outside. He and my grandparents. Because after I got out of foster care, I went to go live with my grandparents. And unfortunately, something happened to where I could not stay with them because I wanted to stay with them. They knew what was going on. They couldn't take both of us, and they felt that being a girl, I was at the most risk, so they took me out. But I wasn't able to stay, and I can't remember why. I cannot remember why. But for the last year and a half of high school, I kind of wound up going back and forth a lot between that absolute hellscape and living in my grandparents' motorhome, which was not the ideal place to live, especially since it was in another county, so we were kind of hiding the fact that I wasn't supposed to even be at that school anymore, but it was kind of this situation where if we had gone the truthful way, it would have been this really ugly, involved process that involved the courts, and it was just easier for someone to bring me into the right county to go to school and pick me up every day. So that's one of the reasons why I have not wanted to put this out there publicly, because my grandparents were the ones who were there, and that's why dealing with this with my grandfather and being kept out has been especially hard for me. And my brother asked me if I want to send anything to be said at the funeral. And honestly, I don't know what to say that wouldn't be extremely petty. I want to say a lot, but I don't think anything I send would actually be read aloud. And I don't think that would be the place. So, I'm not sure. We have to figure that out. I have until tomorrow morning to figure it out. So, fun. So yeah, that's where I've been. That's my kind of very condensed introduction to who I am, why I'm such an absolute basket case half the time, and why I just disappear. So yeah, I don't even know if I'm going to edit this. I might just throw it up as it is because I don't think I can sit through this again. But I just kind of wanted to take some time to actually be honest with you guys, because there is a very real tendency, and being on this side of it, it's a tendency that I can understand, to put out this false version of yourself. And I've always tried to be as honest about myself as possible without going into details that didn't need to be gone into. So, I think finally being able to say some of this stuff might put a lot of some other videos and content into perspective. But I'm not sure how active I will be. I have, I don't know, about 20 videos that I have filmed that I just haven't wanted to sit down and edit. I've been filming a lot, I just haven't been editing really anything. So, mostly just been keeping myself extremely busy with Kickstarter stuff, been keeping myself extremely busy with commissions. Actually getting back into commissions has been, I think, extremely rewarding for me on an emotional and a mental level. Because if you don't know, I used to do commissions full time a long time ago. So getting back into doing that has been a lot of fun. And yeah, that's just kind of what I've been doing. I know I haven't been very present in the Discord. This is why. Because I can't deal with people right now. I just can't. So, I haven't. I just haven't. But, that's a very condensed version. I'm surprised it only took a half hour to get through. But yeah. Yeah. That's what's been going on. So I just wanted to let you guys know extremely transparently what has been going on without having to dance around things. I know I did dance around a couple things that weren't my side to tell, but I think at this point, though, knowing that I can finally cut ties and that there's nothing keeping me there, I'll be able to, I should be able to start moving forward. That's the hope. So, thank you guys. If you sat through this, I love you. I know it was a lot to sit through. I know it wasn't easy to watch, and this is the short version. There are so many things I could tell you about that I just didn't. Don't have time to, don't want to, but that's where it is. So, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with the absolute ridiculous upload schedule. If you're still in the Discord, thanks for still being there. I know it's very quiet. But I think after the holidays, I'm not going to set any kind of timelines on this, but I expect after the holidays is when I should be able to really start getting back on top of things. I just need to take some time to myself. So that's what I've been doing. So, thank you. Love you. See you later. Bye.